Tonight we're going to talk about seed oils and really the silent threat. And it's more of not a silent threat, it's probably more of a gagged threat. The truth about seed oils has probably been kept from us. So all the information that's supposed to be out there has been kept from us. This is a movie that's actually out there, Fed a Lie. You can find it on YouTube. This is a quick trailer, I think a minute and a half.
And the reality today is that food is mostly harming us.
America was plagued with uncertainty.
We now live with so much sickness all around us that we can't even imagine what it feels like to live in a healthy society.
The seed oils, higher polyunsaturated vegetable oils, are driving probably 90% of obesity and chronic disease across the board. So our public health system really is a disaster.
News of a person who suffered a heart attack was flashed to the world on September 24th, 1955.
What we're being told to eat is at the heart of our problem.
To me, this looks like evidence that we are being poisoned.
Seed oils are the single most processed food on the planet. Why not?
I, Dr. Ansel Keys, am a physiologist. My specialty is diet and health.
In 1948, in comes Procter & Gamble.
They literally infused $1.7 million into the American Heart Association.
That should sound the alarm bells for us. We're doing something wrong.
There should have been no experiment since then. It should have been game over for seed oils. Okay.
So that's about a 45-minute show on YouTube or whatever. I will say this, pretty much they repeat what they just said there. So you got the highlights of the whole show. So that's what you need to know. So when we talk about seed oils, they never call them seed oils. They call them vegetable oils. And the truth is, where are the vegetables in them? It's one of those things, I have patients in the past that would come in and they say, oh, I'm a vegetarian. And I always have to laugh because I say, okay, what do you eat? And they're, well, I eat corn chips, pasta, corn, I eat this, this, and this. And I say, where are your vegetables? What vegetables are you eating? And there's never one in there. So I say, you're not a vegetarian, you're a grainitarian. So it's kind of interesting how often people confuse vegetables and grains. And in this case, it's just a marketing ploy. Your vegetable oils, when we're talking about them, are canola oil. It's also called rapeseed oil, corn oil, soybean oil, sunflower, saffron, grapeseed. We also have flax seeds not up there, rice, cottonseed, and peanuts. These are all seed oils that they are manufacturing to get you what you see in the market today. Vegetable oils make up 20% of our daily calories. So 1/5 of the calories that the average American put in their body are actually coming from seed oils. And so it's kind of an interesting one. Number 1 and number 2 are rice and wheat. Vegetable oils are found in almost everything. And as you go down through the list, you know it's there. It's basically all the food that you see, especially any packaged food has it in it. But the interesting one is healthy foods. A lot of times you think that you're eating real healthy and it actually say healthy choice or whatever on it. You start looking at the ingredients in it and there's really no health to it. And seed oils are one of those things that you find a lot in healthy foods because people have been told in the past they're healthy, so they throw them in there to make it look healthy for you. The nut milks and things like that, the non-dairy milks, there's a lot of seed oil in those, in which I didn't know about until I started studying this. I didn't even think about it. Interesting thing, if you go to get, the average person will eat 3 to 5 tablespoons of seed oils a day. But if you actually had to just go eat and get that out of the vegetables and out of the seeds yourself, you'd have to have 60 to 70 ears of corn to get that much oil out of it. So it tells you how concentrated it really is. Or 2 pounds of soybeans. So about that much soybeans is what you'd have to eat to get as much soy oil as you're getting in a day's time period. So it's interesting. So we say, okay, how do we get seed oils into the market and everything? We used to harvest whales and get most of our oil from whales. We used it to do heating lamps. We used it to do any of our industrial oils, but we also used it for cooking from the 1700s until the 1800s. And then whales started becoming a short supply, and also the world kind of put a moratorium on the whales because they were just disappearing. From the 1800s into the 1900s, we basically used lard. We used tallow, and lard comes from pigs, tallow comes from cows. But as we started having less wells and we started using more of that, the price went way up. It actually became very expensive in the early 1900s to actually get tallow and to get lard. Part of this also, during the same time what was going on, is we started mechanizing things. We started making machinery. We started having power plants. We started having things that need to have oil on the gears. We need to have oil in different mechanisms to make them work. And so the need for oil went up. At the same time, we started using crops like corn and soy and cottonseed to make industrial oils. One of the biggest changing points in taking these seed oils and turning them into human consumption was the cottonseed gin. When the cottonseed gin came out in the late 1800s, basically cotton seeds started piling up everywhere. And cotton seeds are extremely, extremely toxic. If you leave them set on the side of the field, you can actually poison the whole field. If your animals would eat them, it would kill them. And so they actually had companies coming in and hauling them away, but they couldn't burn them either because the fumes of cotton seeds will be poisonous in the air. So it was a big problem. Procter & Gamble found out that they could use the cottonseed to make oil to do the machinery, so they were going around and actually farmers and people were paying them to take the cotton seeds away. But now after a certain point, they had too many themselves. So they decided that they would see if they could make a way to make it edible. So hydrogenation came along, and hydrogenation basically it's the change in the hydrogen makeup of oils that makes it so that you can get rid of the taste and things out of it. Once they did this, they came out and they needed a marketing ploy because no one really wanted to use this cleaned up motor oil to eat with. So they came out and they decided to make cookbooks that would go along as their advertising thing. And this was actually how they started out. They said, hey, if you buy our products, take the coupon code off the back or take the sticker off the back, send it in to us, we'll send you a cookbook. And my dad said my grandmother loved it because every year they would come out with a new cookbook and she would collect up all of her labels and send them in and get the cookbook. And of course, all the cookbooks showed you how to use their product in every recipe. But Procter & Gamble, they started out making Crisco, and the cookbooks were fine, but it didn't really get moving in the market. So what they need to do is they need to convince people that Crisco was much better for your health than the other things out there, including tallow and lard. So they came along and they began to pay the American Heart Association. And at the time, American Heart Association was a little one-room place, had a desk and a little file cabinet, and they were getting ready to go out of business. They had no money. Nobody wanted to pay them for anything. They came in 1948, and they gave them $1.7 million. And so in today's money, that's $20 million. So here's a company getting ready to go under. They had no money. Somebody says, hey, if you will come in and promote our oil as being healthy, we will give you this. I'd have to think about it too. If somebody came in and offered me $20 million, I'd probably sell their oil too. So they did that. The American Heart Association didn't have much leverage yet. So they went out and they helped pay certain scientists to help say that it was good too. And one of those was Ansel Keys. Ansel Keys had been doing a lot of studies on soldiers and how diet and how fat pertain to soldiers. They wanted to figure out what's the least amount of fat we can feed a soldier and have them keep going while they're in the battlefield. And so he was already studying fat. They came in and said, hey, can you study these oils? And he began to study them. Well, the government also was paying him at the same time, and he was getting more money from the American Heart Association. So all of his studies before he did that were really holistic, whole-based, healthy studies. At the moment he started getting paid, he changed all of his studies, and he picked and chose his data. And even nowadays, when people go back and try to replicate his data, they can't get it to come out the same way. The problem is our government is still going off his data and not changing anything that they've ever done. So it's still been the same studies, it's still the same things that they put out there. On this here, you can see that even now, we're still putting in more and more and more seed oils. In the 1900s, that's what we did. Now, at 2019, you can see where we're at. The interesting thing is, if you overlay it, which I tried to do, I wasn't very good at it, so I stopped. But if you overlay heart disease with this, it's almost the exact same curve. If you overlay obesity with it, it's almost the exact same curve at the exact same timing. So it's kind of interesting to see that. The government made recommendations. Eisenhower had the heart attack. They mentioned it in a little film a second ago. And it was kind of the first time that they took and flashed every day. They would actually have people come out and talk about Eisenhower and what he was doing to help his heart and how Americans should do this and that. And they even had Ansel Keys, kind of like we had Fauci up during COVID. They had Ansel Keys up telling you, okay, here's what you do to save your heart. Here's how you do it. You need to have more vegetable oil. They actually were spoon-feeding him vegetable oil. And I guess there was actually times, I haven't seen the video, but actual times they were spoon-feeding him vegetable oil on TV to show how healthy it was. And his health continued to decline. So it didn't get better from that moment. It kept going down. So it's kind of interesting how the government propaganda kept going that way. Then everything across the board changed to wanting you to have polyunsaturated fats. And I'm going to tell you more, and I'm going to explain the difference between the fats here in a minute. But just know that they started changing, saying, hey, we need more polyunsaturated fats as we go. The scientific evidence for this wasn't there. It was all propaganda. And even to this day, you can't go find the scientific evidence. And I thought it was kind of interesting. I try to do devil's advocate in everything. So if I think you have a condition when you come in, and I write down, I go and when I do a report of findings for you, I try to prove just the opposite. I try to go through everything I can do to say, no, you don't have it. So when I'm writing this lecture, I go through and I say, okay, let me find the evidence. Let me find what they did. I couldn't find substantial stuff. Everything was a blurb. It was always blurb. Well, it's kind of like, I don't know if you've seen the movie Idiocracy. I don't know if any of you have seen the movie Idiocracy. But in that movie, the government starts putting Gatorade on the fields. And when the people start asking, well, why are you putting Gatorades on the fields? Well, it has electrolytes. And that was the answer that all the public kept saying. As I'm going through here, and I would look up polyunsaturated fats, I'd look up things, and it was basically, the blurb would always be, they're good for you. And then a lot of the blurbs would say, it's scientifically proven that they're good for you. Well, I couldn't find the science. It's actually interesting. I couldn't find it. So, know that the propaganda is pretty strong in this. By the 1950s, they started partially hydrogenating food. So basically, that means we change the structure of it. We start taking hydrogens off. We start making double bonds on it. That's going to be significant here in a little bit. Crisco, Creamy Crisp was one. And I remember, I see the Creamy Crisp shortening things. I've seen them in auctions, kind of with pots and pans and stuff, that the containers are still out there, or you can find them from time to time. But what they did is they made it a softer grease. So instead of having a real hard, thick lard or tallow, it was a little softer. That's going to come to play in a little bit later because they just assumed since it was softer, it just meant you digest it easier. Restaurant chains, by the 1990s, were told that they needed to go over to trans fats, and that trans fats were the best thing in the world. You fast forward to the 2000s, and all of a sudden we find out trans fats are driving obesity and cancer. So now they don't use that anymore either. They've changed it now to other vegetable oils, but they had to take it out. So the propaganda actually led them. They didn't want to change. They were using tallow. They were using coconut oil. They were using lard, and they made them change it over to the trans fats because of all the propaganda. And then later on, really a decade later, they found out they were killing people that way. So hopefully they'll make some changes in the future as well. Manufacturers actually put in their ads, and I couldn't get this any clearer, how good it was for you to have trans fats. So they were saying it's trans fats are good, trans fats are good. My point of this being is that the propaganda led everyone, even some of the biggest grocery store chains, some of the biggest restaurants, to change over to trans fats. And within a decade, all of a sudden they found out it was wrong. So eventually, I think it comes full circle and you figure it out otherwise. Seed oils are the most processed food-like substance on earth. I started using this food-like substance a while back when I have quite a bit of biochemistry background, probably 40 some hours in college biochemistry, maybe more than that. And there's organic things. That means, hey, it's made in nature. Plants make it, animals make it. And there's inorganic things, and that means where it's man-made. A lot of our foods that are man-made now are not organic, they're inorganic. And our bodies can't process them correctly. So those really probably shouldn't be called food. They should be called food-like substances. And seed oils are the most processed food-like substance on earth. This is a picture of canola or rapeseed is what that is. This is the preparation process of how they make seed oils. And knowing that it's most processed, you start seeing this as we go through this. Cleaning. It would be nice if they just cleaned them off with water and things, but most of them are actually using some kind of alcohol base to do that with. And when you make alcohol, when you want to make a chemical, an inorganic chemical, the first thing you do a lot of times is start using an alcohol on it. That's how you break it down. That's how you pull out the chemicals out of it. And most companies use an alcohol to clean the seeds with. And sometimes they let it evaporate, sometimes they don't, but it changes what you have from an organic process to an inorganic process. Then they condition the seeds, and when they condition the seeds, it would also be nice if they just dried it and roasted it, but a lot of times they will actually use chemicals to begin to break down the seed as they're roasting it. Then you have mechanical press. If you ever want to look for a good seed oil, it's one that says only mechanical press. They can take it, squeeze the oil out of it, and leave it alone, but when you get that, it looks like tar. When I was in China, they use rapeseed or canola oil in China, and literally it looks like black motor oil. And they will take their ducks and their chickens, and they will fry them in it. And so they dip it in it, fry it in it, and then they hang them up to sell them on the streets, and it looks like they've been dipped in motor oil. They weren't doing as much chemical processing to it, because first of all, it's cheaper just to squeeze it out and go on your way. But that's, if you were going to do seed oils, that's where you'd want to stop at. But instead, we use hexane basically to start breaking it down. And hexane is a major cancer-causing agent. And in the U.S., they allow them to leave so much hexane in it. So as long as one dose of it is not enough to kill you, they can have it in there. Hexane is a major, major cancer-causing agent. It tends to break down the outside of cells, lets things in and out of cells that shouldn't be there. And it's pretty incredible that we would say, okay, as long as one dose doesn't kill you, you can do it. Well, that means if you get your fries here and then you go get your candy bar here, you probably have 2 doses of hexane in a day and enough to start causing you problems. Most of the time, the solvent isn't extracted and it's left behind, or dissolved and it's left behind there.
Can your body eliminate that?
Over time. It takes time. You know, it depends. It's not so much about eliminating. Eliminating is good, but it's the damage it causes why it's there. So I gave this example last night. When we talk about seed oils and things, seed oils become part of your cell. And let's say I have one little piece of seed oil on my cell. Well, that cell divides into 2 cells. Now it's only in half as many cells because here's 1, now it's 2. It divides again, it's only in 1. That's how you start to eliminate. But if you have 50 billion pieces of this, it's on every cell, and they divide, they keep just dividing out. So if you stop putting things in, you're going to be a lot better than what you were if you keep going. On that aspect of it, I'm not as worried about us older people as I am about our kids. You know, our base, our cells that we started out with, we had good food. We had good products and everything, and our cells started out perfect and whole, and they're dividing, and maybe we get something stuck here and there, we're fine. When you take a young kid, and this is all they're having all the time, you know, everything comes out of a box, everything comes from McDonald's, everything comes from fast food restaurants and things, and every cell's covered in it. They started out with not even a good base. So it's scarier for them than it is us by far. They degum it. This is a whole other chemical process. And basically, when they talk about removing the phospholipids off here, that's basically a phosphorus group and a lipid group. The problem is when they remove it off there, now they make it where it can stick to your cells. So this degumming agent or degumming process actually makes it more sticky in our bodies than what it does other times. Then they alkalize it using sodium hydroxide. This is to actually try to get the poison out. The poison that is in minium is gustapol. It is the thing that cottonseeds that would poison the fields, poison the livestock and things. That's the whole reason they turn it alkaline so they can get rid of it. The problem is they're still then having to process it. Poison came out and they're still dumping it down the drain. They're still putting it out in the environment. It's just now nobody's caring because it's not killing the cattle directly. Maybe killing our fish and other things. Then they try to neutralize it all. because now they poured all those chemicals in. So now they come back and they actually acidify it, which actually changes the hydrogen content to it, and I'll show you what that does in a moment. And then they bleach it. What I've seen on videos and things, if they show you this, it looks like what the products did in China. It looks like motor oil. And they turn around and they bleach it, so at least they'll start looking like these clear bottles here. By the way, China stinks when you fly in and land in there, and it's the oil. You smell the oil there when we fly into Guangzhou and that. It smells like, if you've ever gotten something for the swim pool, a little plastic thing, and you go to open it the first time out of the package and it has that smell, that's what it smells like when you get off the airplane in China. And after a while, you realize it's their cooking oils and stuff that they're using there. So, and and I used to fly into China, I used to run import business. When you come back to the United States and you get off the plane, all the customs control officers be holding their face and holding their nose because you smell so bad. It's just on you. And you open your suitcase when you get home, you stink like basically this kind of oil. Then they deodorize it so you don't smell like China is what they do. And there's chemicals they use for that. Then they winterize it, which basically means they pull off any of the thick stuff out of it. And they use chemicals to do that again too. And then this bottom one was funny. When I was researching this, everything from Procter & Gamble and the other companies always kept saying, and then it should be packaged appropriately. And I didn't pay attention to the first couple times. And then I thought, I wonder what that means. How should you package this oil appropriately? Well, to package oil appropriately, it should be put in glass. If you put it in a metal container, the chemicals that they've used in it actually makes the oil or the metals leach into the oil. And if you put it in plastic, the way the plastic is set up, it actually begins to leach plastic into it. So if you're actually going to buy proper oil, it should be in a glass container. Like you see olive oil done that way, you see some other ones done. But anyway, I thought that was interesting because I've never seen any kind of corn oil, soybean oil, or anything in a glass container. But the companies themselves, when you look at the processing thing, say should be packaged in appropriate containers. So kind of funny they know, but it doesn't really matter. So now, why are vegetable oils considered healthy? So this is where I was playing devil's advocate again, saying, okay, so we've been lied to, but they're probably still healthy for you. I go out and look, and the number one thing right off the bat you will find when you're looking at vegetable oils is that they have less cholesterol and they lower your cholesterol compared to saturated fats. This is where I need to tell you, anytime you see saturated fats, we're talking about animal fats. We're talking about lard. We're talking about tallow. We're talking about ghee. We're talking about those things that come from animals are saturated fats. And I will show you the difference here in a while, but that's important to know. Saturated fats come from animals. Unsaturated fats typically come from plants or seeds. So everything you see out there says that unsaturated fats, ones that come from vegetable oils, will lower your LDL cholesterol. And that's interesting. So I go and look it up, and it's true because LDLs stick to those type of oils. So it's not necessarily that it lowers them, it sticks it to them. Now you can't get the count of them when you actually do the count in the blood work. So they're there, they're just bound up. And at first that sounds really good. It's not such a good thing. Interesting enough, they came out and said that even before any trials were done and everything, they started saying how good these vegetable oils were in your heart. So as soon as the American Heart Association was paid, game was on. These are the best things in the world for your heart. These are wonderful for your heart. And I'm going to go have a nice expensive dinner now that they pay me $1.7 million. And that's it. The serum levels of cholesterol is interesting. There are not any credible studies out there that show that lowering your serum cholesterol actually gives you a longer life. And we are told that all the time. When you look at cholesterol levels, you go to the doctor, they keep telling you that lowering your cholesterol levels will increase your lifespan. And I'll tell you why later, but there's a book out there called Low Cholesterol Leads to an Early Death, Evidence from 101 Scientific Studies. And it's a kind of an interesting book because you can kind of open it up to any page, and he comes through, he talks about the study, what they studied, And then the last line sums it up. Let's see here. Find the last line. The results of the analysis in this study showed that higher cholesterol levels are linked to a longer life. Higher cholesterol levels. I don't know if usually I pick it right up. The most effective way to raise HDL cholesterol levels is to consume a diet high in saturated fats. That means by animals. So, the data from this study shows that there is a decrease in death rates at a higher level of total cholesterol, LDL cholesterol and HDL cholesterol in middle-aged men compared to lower levels of total cholesterol and LDL in the individuals. And so the whole book, like I said, it's 101 studies, and you can go through each one. And when you actually go and look up the studies briefed in here, but when you go and look them up, they're actually pretty good studies. And it's interesting. The rest of the world pretty much knows this. So when I was going through medical technology school doing my internship in the hospital in 1997, basically cholesterol was supposed to be 200 plus your age. So as you got older, your cholesterol was supposed to go up. Because as you get older, it's harder for you to replenish your cells. It's harder for you to mend yourself, and cholesterol does that. Cholesterol makes every cell in your body in that. And so it's interesting. In March, I'll be doing one on heart health and that, and I'll go into more of that. But there was no studies really supporting what they did here. And yes, your cholesterol levels will lower when you do seed oils. There's no doubt about it. The bottom one is the book I picked up there. Omega-3 fatty acids in seed oils can reduce your triglycerides. So this is kind of an interesting one. First of all your fats in your body are made of triglycerides. So as soon as you try to lower triglycerides, you're actually lowering the fats in your body, which is kind of interesting. And they did this as a way to promote these seed oils. The problem is with seed oils is that they're really skewed. Most of your seed oil is actually an omega-6, which is inflammatory. You need to have a little bit to make things work in your body correctly, but when you get too much, it's extremely inflammatory, especially inside your arteries. So here they're promoting, oh, we got omega-3s in here, and the good thing is they're going to lower your triglycerides. It's wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Well, the bad thing is, your amount of omega-6s compared to the amount of omega-3s you have in it is really bad. It's kind of like saying, hey, I'm going to go here and get this pie and I'm going to eat it. And it's going to be really healthy for me to eat this pie full of sugar and all this junk because there are apples in it. That's kind of what they're saying about seed oils. There's some omega-3s in here. So the other thing, the reason they say that these are so good for you is because they lower blood sugar. And this is probably the biggest issue when you come to seed oils. And I'm going to go more into it when I show you actually the bonds and the chemistry behind it. But the reason it lowers your blood sugar is the same reason that your cholesterol lowers. Your sugar sticks to it, sticks to the oil. And unfortunately what happens when the sugar sticks to your oil, it goes through your veins and it makes a scouring pad. And it scrapes the inside of your veins as it goes through. Once your inside of your vein gets scraped up, well then, guess what sticks to it to actually help you out? Cholesterol. The problem is, the cholesterol that's in most of us now, much of it is bound to these seed oils. So it's a lipid complex that's sticking to the side. So cholesterol is sticking there. Shortly after, calcium sticks to it. So now you start getting calcified in here. If we only had cholesterol running in there, cholesterol actually is made to heal the side of this lining is what it's made for. That's why you have to have cholesterol. That's why a lot of these studies will show people that have a higher cholesterol survive from heart attack. They survive from stroke. People with lower cholesterol die. The problem is most of these studies were done on healthy people not eating vegetable oil. So when you take a study and you do it with people high on vegetable oils, it shows that, the more lower we can lower everything, sugar, everything, you're better off. It's because of this compound. It's scraping up the inside of the arteries. It's sticking to the side, and then calcium sticking to it. So, it lowers our blood sugar.
Does sugar stick to the saturated fat?
No, and I'll show you why here in a minute. This is one of the things. So the other ploy that they used to sell it was because it's digestible. They actually ran this in their ads. It's digestible. And what they were referring to is at room temperature, your tallow, your lard is solid. And Crisco was a little softer. And so they said, well, if it's softer, it has to be more digestible. So they started out to say it's more digestible, and they couldn't say it because it wasn't true. So instead, they just said, it's digestible. And so it's kind of funny. But in your mind, when you first read it, you're thinking, oh, it's more digestible. It's healthier for me. It's more digestible. It doesn't say it's more digestible. It just says it's digestible. So kind of a funny type of thing. They were kind of referring to this, though, saying humans can't digest animal fat. So now, saturated fats, animal fats, why are they considered unhealthy? So basically, it increases your LDL, which they call your bad fat. Saturated fats will increase them. They said that the LDL contributed to the plaquing in the arteries and atherosclerosis. It does in the situation when it's bound to unsaturated fats. That's when it causes a problem. It also has another situation here. Whenever they tried to actually dissect these, they actually didn't find the LDL where they thought they would. So a lot of times they'd actually find fibrin, which means it's actually trying to heal it. And so it was caught in the fibrin process, not actually in the buildup of calcium on it. So the proof that LDL is actually causing some of this atherosclerosis, no, it's kind of just carried there. Plaquing narrows the restrictions of the artery. So this is all, when you go online and you look up LDL, this is what you're going to see about it. Yep, it causes heart problems. So they say it increases the risk of heart disease, it elevates the LDL, and basically you're going to die if your LDL goes up. They also said that when you do saturated fats, that you have a potential of having more type 2 diabetes. The reason they said this wasn't because there's any data or any proof behind it. They basically took the fact that unsaturated fats lowered your blood sugar. So if they lower your blood sugar, then this has to cause diabetes. But this doesn't make your blood sugar go up. So it's kind of interesting how they came to that conclusion. But when you look it up and you look up saturated fats, they'll say, oh yeah, your LDL is going to go up. You're going to become a type 2 diabetic. And the truth is, before we put these seed oils in, you saw the chart a while ago how the seed oils went up. Your obesity, your heart disease, everything went up with that chart. Certain types of cancer. So interesting enough, the only study I could find on this, they were actually comparing lunch meats, is what they were comparing when they tried to do this. So they were saying lunch meats are full of saturated fat. Well, lunch meats are also full of nitrites, which can cause different stomach cancers and intestinal cancers and everything. But they never just straight up took lard or fat or anything like that and did it. But they figured bologna has a lot of fat in it, and so let's call bologna what we're going to test with. Well, yeah, it also has nitrites in it. Obesity. And basically, it comes down to if you're going to eat a ton of fat, and I don't care whether you're going to eat the seed oils or you're going to eat this, it can cause you to be fatter. So they're saying, hey, it causes obesity, so don't eat it. Your seed oils are going to cause you to be fatter too if you eat too much seed oil. And then inflammation. The inflammation, I couldn't find anything of the studies on it compared to what are out there on omega-6 and omega-9. I could find a lot of studies on that, but the inflammation I couldn't find here. What difference does it make between this oil, this fat, that fat? It's all the same. That's not quite true. So, to begin with, when we look at fats as a whole, we need to say lipids. So if you're talking about from a chemistry standpoint, lipids, we're talking about fats. Lipids are organic compounds. So that's what we need to know off the beginning. They're natural. They're what occurs in nature. They're everywhere. And then they are insoluble in water. So if you take fat and you try to rinse it off something, it usually floats to the top. It's always there. So it doesn't like the water much. Fats or lipids include fats, oils, waxes, steroids. So cholesterol. Cholesterol is made from sterol, which is actually a steroid, and phospholipids. So now, fats versus oil. What's the difference? The only difference between a fat and an oil is what they're like at room temperature. A fat is solid at room temperature, and an oil is liquid at room temperature. That's the only difference. So really they're the same thing. Oils and fats are made of fatty acids. So basically when we're looking at this is a fatty acid. This is a fatty acid. Basically it's a string of carbons and hydrogens fastened to a hydroxyl group on the end. That's what we have. That's what makes a fatty acid. This one up here is considered a saturated fat. So there's no double bonds. All your carbons are filled up with hydrogens. And this is an unsaturated fat. Basically, there's a place here where you have a double bond. You could actually put on 2 hydrogens on there and straighten it out if you wanted to and make it a saturated fat. But this is what makes the difference here. When we talked about them processing the oils and things in the factories, this is what they did. They came in and used chemicals to pull this off. The difference is when you pull this off, when you have saturated fats at room temperature, they stack up just perfectly nice and they're real close together and they become a solid. When these are at room temperature, they can't stack very good, and so it's more loose. So it's kind of like having pickup sticks. If you had them thrown on top of each other, they don't stack up very good. That's kind of what you have here. But if you took and organized them, they'd be kind of a solid mass. That's the difference between these two. The structure of this makes all the difference in the world. So now, if it has a double bond and where it's at makes all the difference. So this again is your saturated fat. All of them are full up. These both are unsaturated fats. The difference here is that this one, instead of having both of them open on the same side, one's open on one side and one's open on the other side. I'm going to tell you why that makes a big difference in a little bit. But this is a saturated fat, this is a trans saturated fat, and this is a cis unsaturated fat. You don't have to remember all this in the end. I'm going to tell you what's important of what seed oils to take, but I'm getting to a point. So now, why are seed oils unhealthy? I went through why they tell you they're good, but why are they bad? Seed oils have more double bonds and also have more trans bonds. Those little places that I showed you make places not only hydrogen can stick to there, but other things like sugars. Other chemicals get stuck to them and they tend to stick to them hard. Your cholesterol sticks to them. Fatty acids are associated with 23 to 26% increase in heart disease. At first, they came out and they told McDonald's, basically, you're going to have to change this. And the government told McDonald's, you have to change over to trans fats in the 90s because it's the healthiest thing in the world. Well, then all of a sudden, these studies came out and said, okay, hold on. Everybody that's eating these trans fats are dying, and they're dying very rapidly, enough so that the FDA actually came out and said, okay, McDonald's, now you got to stop using it. And so it increased it by about 25%. Double bonds are associated with oxidation. Anytime you hear the word oxidation, then the very next thing that comes to your mind should be rust. That's what oxidation is. So basically, if you want to speed up the aging process, you want to have skin lesions, you want to have problems like that, you want to have liver problems, you oxidate things. So that's why we always talk about antioxidants, like your berries, things like that, because they help you stay young. This does just the opposite. Those double bonds basically make you oxidate. This is an important line here. Sugars are more reactive to double bonds, creating sacrolipids. These are what are tearing up the inside of your arteries. They also don't only tear up the inside of your arteries. On every cell that you have, they have a phospholipid layer. So basically it's a fat layer that goes around your cells, and the lipids fasten to that all the way around, and different lipids pull in different chemicals in and pull different chemicals out. The problem is, when you put in these fats, these oils, with the sugar fastened to them, they take the place of that good lipid layer around your cells. So now your cells can't function correctly. You get more cancers, you get more illness, you get more things that just don't, you get hurt and you don't heal up like you used to. It's because of what's going on with this. They actually create a endotoxin, which actually makes you sick too. So kind of interesting there. They increase inflammation, they increase the risk of heart disease, infertility. It's very interesting. On men and women, there's a few places that your body does not recognize as being part of yourself. And one of them is the ovary and one of them is the testicle. The other one's the lens of your eye, and then the last one is a lot of times the synovial fluid in your joints. You'll see people that get the big old gnarly joints. It's because the synovial fluid leaks out and your body attacks it because it thinks it's a foreign invader. If you get your eye poked wrong and the lens is exposed, your body will kill it and attack it. If you get a testicle or an ovary punctured, your body attacks it and basically you become infertile. Well, these oils, the way they work out with the sacrolipids is that they start replacing the lining on it. And so all of a sudden your body starts to attack it. So you have infertility going through the roof because of this. And then atherosclerosis, which is hardening of the arteries. Back to the same picture again. So when I've taught this in the past on chemistry and biochemistry, and we're talking about bonds, I always talk about these white dots being bumpers in a parking lot. You know, kind of you go to Walmart, you go to Albertsons or something, there's a concrete barrier, and all the blue things here are hydrogen, but they're cars. And so this one here, the whole parking lot's full, no bad guys, nobody else can get into the parking lot. It's the way it is. You get to this trans fat, or the trans unsaturated fat, and there's actually two places you can park a car. So two bad guys can park there if they want to. Then you have a unsaturated cis fat here, and the way it's set up, not too many bad guys can park there. Because if you try to park two there, they kind of bump into each other and there's a problem. So usually only one can park there. So when you're looking at trans fat, too many bad guys can park there. When you're looking at cis fat, only one bad guy can park there. So that's why best, basically worst, and then mediocre. There's a couple places where this is beneficial, and I'll get to that later. But the trans fat, there's no beneficial place for it. On the cis fat, there's a couple beneficial places. So now, why are animal fats or saturated fats healthy for you? Every cell in your body is made with an animal fat. It's made with a saturated fat. Every cell in your body is made of that. So we're actually trying to put in unsaturated fats, and then your body has to try to break it down, change it, and make it so that you can use it. So that's number one right off the bat. Every cell is in there. Steroids. Every hormone in your body is made with a saturated fat. Every neurotransmitter in your body is made with a saturated fat. So it's very important. Most processes in the body are completed with animal fat. There are two exceptions. There are two fats out there that you can't get. If you go to be a carnivore, there's two fats out there you can't get. Alpha-linoleic acid and linoleic acid. Those are two that you actually have to get from plants and nuts and things. And those actually are not really building products in your body. They're coenzymes. They actually have to take something, grab a hold of it, and take it over to another process to be made. So they actually help out, kind of like a lot of vitamins. A lot of vitamins, we call them vitamins, they're actually coenzymes. They don't actually build anything in your body. They are transporters. They go and get things and hand them over. B12 is a perfect example. B12 is called cobalamin. Its job is to carry a methyl group, a carbon and 3 hydrogen. It goes and grabs it, takes it to your cell, and hands it off. These two oils are the same way. They're coenzymes. Their job isn't really to build anything. Their job is to carry things, and we have to have them. Animal fats are definitely higher in saturated fats, but they also contain two cis unsaturated fats. Basically, the mono, which means it only has one place on the whole thing that it's that way. So it's a fat just like the one we watched a while ago, or saw a while ago. It was a mono because it only had one double bond. So it could only have one thing plug into it, and that's when we want some of those good healthy ones. So our animal fats have some monounsaturated fats, the allylic acid that's found in beef, lamb, and pork. And then there's a couple, very, 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 very few that are healthy for us, and there are omega-3s. So when you talk about getting omega-3s, and there's several types of omega-3s, but your polyunsaturated fats, there are just a few that are healthy for us, and most of those we're going to get from our fish oils. I also, I have no proof of this yet, but I think there is a limit to how much fish oil you can put in before you have problems. And what made me think of this, I was at my accountant's office one day, and he rolled up his sleeve, and he was black and blue from head to toe. And I said, "Are you on blood thinner?" He goes, "No." I said, "Are you taking fish oil?" He goes, "Yeah, my wife has me taking like 6 a day." anyway, the guy was bleeding to death on the inside because of how much it thinned out his blood and everything. So there is a limit to how much you should have in that, and I think we have to be careful going too far that way too.
Is that all the omega-3s they're not good?
Yeah. I can't think of any that couldn't. And you know when you get too many omega-3s because you just start bruising easy. That's how you know. So there's some patients in the past that I put on high doses of omega-3s, and I say the moment you start bruising easy, we'll back it down. And so that's kind of how you know where your limiting dose is on it. So, and whatever you see on the outside, when that person's bruising on the outside with omega-3s, it's like the tip of the iceberg. If you bruise that bad on the outside, you're bruising on the inside, you know. So it's interesting. You think about it, if you get bumped on the outside enough to make you bruise here, well, if you get something like poop traveling through your bowels and it's really pushing through the heart, it's bruising up all your guts on the inside as it goes through too. So now, what should you eat? That's probably why everybody's here. You should eat healthy, saturated fats. So bacon is actually pretty good for you. Meats, beef, pork, lamb, poultry, with the skin on. If you're going to eat chicken, everybody pulls the skin off and everything because they're worried about the fat. They're worried about that. It's actually healthy for you. It does have calories. So what happened out of all this when the American Heart Association kind of made a war on animal fats, then all of a sudden, kind of at the same time, they made a war on fats in your food. The problem was when you take fat out of food, you have to replace the flavor with something else. So all of a sudden they started dumping sugars in, and then they started making fake sugars to dump in. And then what they did is when they took the fat out, they actually put vegetable oils in most of the stuff. So a lot of your stuff, a lot of your candy bars, they'll say healthy choice on them. They'll say all this stuff. If you go and read them, they actually have palm oil, they have canola oil, they have all this, they have corn oil in it because they took all the good fats out and they had to have something to get the flavor back in, so they poured in these fats into them. So anyway, tallow, which is beef fat and lamb fat and sheep fat, lard, which is from pork fat, ghee. Ghee is one of those ones that's kind of interesting. If ghee is made right, most people can use it. But ghee is fat from milk, is what it is. The problem is about only 1/5 of people over 5 can actually digest and consume dairy properly. It's a genetic thing in there, but most kids lose the enzymes to actually properly digest dairy. Dairy has 4 things in it. It has lactose, and there's about 1/5 of people that can digest lactose properly. Then there's casein. Only about 1/5 of people can digest casein properly. And then you have whey. Quite a few people can process whey, but there's a number that can't. And then you have ghee, which is the fat in it. And so when they make ghee, they basically pull the fat off and basically clean it up and make it into ghee. Some places are like, hey, there's not much ghee here, so let's just throw in some whey. It doesn't matter if we have a little casein in there because it'll thicken it up anyway. So it's hard to get true ghee out there. And maybe you're one of the lucky 20% of people who can eat dairy up to the rest of your life, and that's good. But it's an interesting thing of how that whole marketing went down too. Coconut and coconut oil are good for you. They actually have a number of omega-6, which is inflammatory, but there's a lot of other good properties in coconut. And you don't want to go crazy on it, but it works well. Interesting enough, one of my favorite things to use for killing bacterial infections, like whether it be in your gut or even if you have somebody who has stinky armpits, is to get monolaurin, which is a piece of the coconut oil, and you take it, and bad bacteria eat it really fast. They love it, and they just gorge themselves on it, and they can't digest it fast enough, and they explode and die. Good bacteria eat it extremely slow, and they flourish and they grow well. So coconut oil is very good for putting the right populations of bacteria even on your skin or in your gut. There are healthy cis unsaturated fats. And so these are healthy fats that you get from nuts, not peanuts. We talked about peanuts. Peanuts are not nuts. Peanuts are actually a legume or a bean And so not nuts. Avocados, olives, whole grains. Now, people are going to say, hold on, what? You just put whole grain. The word in front of it is very important. Whole grains. I showed you the slide up there earlier that said if you were going to get all the oil that you're going to get in your tablespoon, you'd have to eat 50 or 60 to 70 ears of corn. You're not going to eat that much whole grain. So you do get healthy fats out of whole grains. So we're talking brown rice, quinoa, things like that you're getting whole, or oatmeal, things like that. Eggs are a good source of cis fats and also of cholesterol in there. Green vegetables don't have a lot of oil, but if you've ever just made a straight vegetable soup and you put vegetables in and you cook them down, you'll see a little sheen of oil on the top of it. Even if you didn't put any oil in there, you'll see a little sheen on the top of that when you're cooking it up. That's actually the cis fats coming out of the vegetables when you cook them up. And then your fish, salmon, tuna, herring, most of your cold water fish. So your trout, all those. And then, yeah, it's a catch-22. I think we're poisoning everything, but yeah. It's walnuts. I put walnuts separate from nuts because it's going to pop up several times. Walnuts are a lot more healthy for you than I probably realized. I'm a fellow in acupuncture in Oriental medicine, and the Chinese always talk about, well, walnuts are the best thing for your brain. They say it constantly. And when you ask them why, all the old Chinese guys say the same thing. Well, it looks like a brain, And so, okay, I just thought they were crazy. Cholesterol without saturated fat. So that's basically the one way that you can get straight up cholesterol. A lot of times you can get cholesterol that's bound to it, but this one here is bound to that cis monosaturated fat when you have it. So eggs are actually an incredible source. Shrimp are an incredible source of cholesterol. And for a long time, there was a big government push saying, don't eat eggs, they have cholesterol in them. And don't eat crabs, don't eat shrimp. Well, if you take the cholesterol theory in full blast, yeah, and you want to lower your cholesterol, get rid of these things. But actually, the cholesterol in them is a good cholesterol for you. In fact, the eggs have a lot of HDL cholesterol in them. Animal fats alone don't have everything that you need for a human body. So right now, the big deal is for people to go on carnivore diets. And there's a lot of people. I probably had, so far this year, we're only 2 weeks into the year. I probably had 10 patients come in that are on carnivore diet. They're eating nothing but animal products and everything. You can't get all the fats you need from animals. And I will say this, people that go on a vegetarian diet are really, really, really healthy for about 2 years. And then they fall apart. People that go on a carnivore diet are really, really healthy for about 2 years. It actually gives the body a break. The body has to do your liver does about 800 jobs. It breaks down things, it makes things, and it cleans out things. Well, if you take out a group of its jobs, it functions really well for a while. So that's why going on one diet or the other for a while cleans up, people feel good, and they'll say, everybody should do this. At about the 2-year mark, if you're a vegetarian, you start missing some of the protein processes that you needed from animal products. If you go on the carnivore diet, at about that 2-year mark, you've ran out of all the things that you need from the plants. So, truth is, you need a balanced diet. And there's times when you can come in and maybe go vegetarian for a while or go carnivore for a while and you feel better, and that's fine, and then you mix back into things. Most people right now on carnivore diet are probably feeling good because they weren't eating necessarily vegetables. They were eating grains and they had a problem with lectins. So they took the lectins out of their diet and they felt better. The two that we talked about earlier are the 2 reasons why you need other things other than animal fats. Alpha-linoleic acid, these are your omega-3s. These ones you're going to get from a lot of your seeds. And I say it again, I was talking about seeds being processed into oil and the chemical process that actually made them bad. The seeds themselves and the oils in them are healthy until you have to take 50 ears of corn and make it into a jug of oil, So flaxseed, chia seed, hemp seed. Now, I will say those 3, if you get too much of those, any one of those 3, most people become sensitive to them after a while. And if you have a thyroid problem, flaxseed is probably not for you. Flaxseed is one of those ones where I'd say probably 70% of people that have a thyroid problem have a gluten problem, and that flaxseed cross-reacts with it. So you gotta be careful with it.
What amount is too much, I guess?
You know, I think if you're taking capsules and tablespoons every day, you're getting too much. You know, if you're using it as a supplement, you're probably getting too much. If you're adding it to flavor things, you're adding that, you're not getting too much. Yeah. So I have pumpkin seeds there again, and then walnuts. I have walnuts on here again because walnuts actually have this in it. So not only do they have your good fats, your good cis fats, they also have these alpha linolenic acids in it too. Soybeans and edamame, that's basically fermented soybeans. Brussels sprouts. Brussels sprouts, I thought weren't going to have much in it, but actually have a pretty good supply. Most of your green vegetables have very little in it. So like when you look at spinach, you look at kale, they have less in it. Brussels sprouts have more in it. So I think it could be that Brussels sprouts are more dense. So when you look at spinach, it's pretty loose, and Brussels sprout is very dense. And Brussels sprout, anytime you take a seed, everything's condensed into a seed. All your nutrients, all your minerals are condensed in a seed, and even the first sprout that comes up has almost all the minerals that are going to be in the full plant in the end. So at this point, Brussels sprouts are still really tight and compact and do very well for you.
Have you heard of purslane?
Yeah, I don't know how it didn't follow up in any of them, so I would assume it has it in there too.
It's supposed to have a high amount of vitamin C.
Yeah, I bet it does.
How come you don't have the cans for content?
Because it didn't show up in as the alpha lipoic. It didn't have the alpha lipoic acid in it. Came back to the cis fats that were healthy in the nuts. It was in there, but that's the whole reason I put walnuts separate in that one chart is because they show up again here. So yeah, but pecans didn't have them in it, so they were just a little bit different. So anyway, this is your alpha lipoic acid. These are the things you need to get it in. Walnuts in there are important. Your linoleic acid. If you look at this one here, so these are your omega-6s. You want to have some omega-6s because they help in the building process. As soon as you go over the limit on omega-6s, you are setting in an inflammatory situation. So when you see people nowadays, then they're like, well, I don't really eat much. I'm not doing stuff. A lot of people aren't fat. When you have patients and you actually come in and feel them, a fat patient is like cottage cheese. You can actually feel into them, and there's a cottage cheese feeling to them. There are people out there that are just swollen. And I would say nowadays, a lot of people are swollen. And you can even see people now going on Ozempic, and they're losing 50 or 60 pounds, and they're still just swollen. Like they've lost the weight, but they're swollen, and that water weight just makes them puff up. And that's what happens when you get way too many omega-6s and even way too many omega-9s. Omega-6s that are healthy for you are found in sunflower, sesame seeds, but I want you to see again, walnuts. So don't go out and eat a gallon of walnuts, but know that that's the thing. Pine nuts, Brazil nuts, and then green leafy vegetables, a very small amount. And that's, like I said, when you cook them down, you'll see the oil come up off of them. And then coconut oil again. It's omega-6s, it's healthy. I've had some patients that have had some conditions where I've actually had them take a tablespoon of coconut oil a day, and we've gotten them over it, but that's not everybody. If you have a little coconut oil, use it to just saute things in. That's perfect. If you want to eat coconut chips, that's fine. So your healthy oils. This is really the chart. You say, okay, what am I going to cook with? Olive oil, avocado oil, coconut oil, macadamia oil. I have to guess that has to be an expensive oil because I've never seen it in my life. So, but it happens to be on the list. Hazelnut oil, which I have seen. I was given some that one time. I don't even have a clue what I did with it, but I was given some one time. And then tallow, which is your beef, and then lard. I looked around the best I could to find a chart that showed me like what temperature they could get up to. I found this chart probably 2, 3, 4 times. The catch is I don't think it's right. And the reason I don't think it's right is because it has olive oil smoking at 325 to 400. And it has coconut oil smoking at 350. I can put coconut oil in one pan and olive oil in another pan, and the olive oil will smoke before that coconut oil. So that little fact made me question it all the way. But probably a year ago, maybe a little more than that, it was probably a year ago, I was doing something, and I was actually studying the biolipid layer around the cell. And I was studying the sugars going into it and out of it and everything. And all of a sudden, it came to my mind that probably one of the most important things we put in our body is the fat, which fat we put in our body. And so then I went and I just started doing the study on, okay, what does animal fat look like? What does the fats look like in our body? What do these fats, seed oil fats look like and everything? And it actually freaked me out. I thought, okay, these oils from a biochemical standpoint don't match up with our biochemistry in our body. And if you're putting them in, we somehow have to make them right, or they're going to make other chemicals. And that's when all of a sudden I started looking at these poly bonded fats. I started looking at all of the double bonds in them. And then you start looking at, okay, what wants to stick most to these things? And it was all the harmful things wanted to stick to them. And so then you're carrying them around your blood vessels. The other thought that came to mind is, I used to own a supplement company. I sold it when I moved out here. But one of the things, if you want to put something into the body extremely fast, you make it into what's called a liposome or liposomal. And maybe you've seen liposomal vitamin C, things like that. And basically what that means is you take something you want to put in the body and you wrap it with fat. And because if you make it small enough and you wrap it with fat, the second it touches the outside of your skin, the second it touches the inside of your mouth, it goes right in the bloodstream. Well, it had to have been right around the exact same time on a TV show. I was watching somebody bake, and they had all their flour and everything in the thing, and they poured in vegetable oil into it. And all of a sudden, they blended it up with a blender. And I thought, that's interesting. They just made a whole bunch of gluten liposomes. And so you do that all the time. Then you turn around and eat that, especially if you eat the raw dough. But even if not, the fat's still there. You eat that, a lot of that goes straight into your bloodstream. So all those preservatives in a Betty Crocker cake mix, all those things like that, if you pour in oil and you blend it up, you literally just gave it a straight shot right to your arteries. And so it's kind of scary when you think about, you go to the store now and you read all of the labels on things, and it's, corn oil, it's canola oil, it's this, and you think, oh, it's nice and healthy. The second you put it in there and start chewing it, some of those little particles are poof, right into your bloodstream. So it kind of freaked me out a little bit about what we put in our body. But these, if you're going to do anything, these are the best. I'm here to tell you, I don't eat perfect. I eat pretty good, but not perfect. You can't go out and eat and not get the bad fats. And part of it is they're cheap. If you say, well, I saw on Facebook probably 3 weeks ago, somebody was complaining on the Cody Classified saying, well, all these restaurants ought to go to tallow or lard in their frying machines and all that kind of stuff. I think that would be wonderful. I wouldn't want to pay for the fries and the cost of it that what it would take to pay for the fries. If all of a sudden you had to pay for tallow and lard and that, and you had to clean it out every so often and do it again, your fry, you'd literally go pay $20 for a thing of fries. So in some ways, I don't blame any restaurant for having it. But when you're going to cook, when you're going to eat at home, look at the recipes, look at the things, do it the right way at home. So, I talked about that cell dividing, and if you're putting it in and that's all your cell's made of is the bad fats, you're in trouble. But if, let's say 5 days a week, you're putting in good fats, and then you go out and you have the fries on a Friday night and you come in, well, at least you're not killing yourself. It's not good for you, but it's not bad. So